Are you ready to shatter ceilings, to redefine what's possible in your life and business? Then welcome to the Beyond Woman podcast, where we dive deep into the heart of empowerment, the art of crafting a lifestyle business that truly serves you, and the tools to unlock your most authentic, powerful self. I'm your host, Jacqueline Walker Johnson, and here we celebrate the women who are rewriting the rules, the visionaries carving their own paths, and the experts who are sharing their hard-won wisdom to guide us all. Join us for intimate conversations with women who are not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. Women who have the expertise and the sheer grit to empower you to step into your limitless potential. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and transformed. This is the Beyond Woman podcast. Let's begin.
There's a kind of silence that doesn't mean peace. It's the silence a man carries when he's been taught that emotions make him weak, that speaking pain out loud is a threat to his manhood. But what happens to all that unspoken weight, the heartbreak, the self-doubt, the exhaustion he never mentions? Welcome to the Beyond Woman Conversation. I'm Jacqueline Johnson, your host, and today we're diving into the quiet, often misunderstood world of men's emotional battles in love, life, and fatherhood. This episode was inspired by a deeply moving feature written by Faith Walson, titled The Hurt Hidden in His Stillness. And in the spirit of that piece, we've brought the conversation to life. So joining us, of course, is Faith herself, the voice behind the powerful reflections. We have Barry, who represents the lived reality of many men, who also will help us to see behind the silence. We also have Coach Gerald, a lawyer, a life strategist, and in this conversation, he's going to help men break the silence and reclaim their emotional freedom. This is not about blame, it's about bridging between what men feel and what the world sees. So let's talk, let's listen, let's understand. This isn't a conversation about men's silence. It's about what lives beneath it, the untold pain, the expectations, the love they try to give even when they're hurting, and how we as women and as a community can listen better. So let's jump right in. What I'm going to ask each person to do is to just give a brief introduction of themselves. Let us know a little bit about you, starting with you, Coach Gerald.
Hi, my name is Coach Jarrell Peters. I live in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm a transformation coach, a life and relationship coach to be specific. I specialize in helping people to live fulfilling lives, and particularly in the areas of relationships. I'm also an attorney for the Registrar General of Trinidad and Tobago, and I have two very fulfilling jobs, and I quite enjoy it.
Awesome. You want to go ahead, Faith?
Hi, I'm Faith Meloni Watson. I'm a singer, songwriter, I'm an extreme athlete, as well as a fitness coach.
And last but not least, go ahead, Barry.
I'm first and foremost a father of two boys. I work in corporate marketing, to be specific. I volunteer often, primarily in the area of sports, where I feel like that's where we can impact young men the most. And I'm just a fun-loving person who enjoys life.
Awesome. Thank you so much for allowing us to get to know you a little bit better. In our first segment, what we want to talk about is the origin of the silence. Right? And it's all about where and how men suppress their emotions. I want to start off with you, Faith. You wrote the feature that inspired this conversation. What moment or realization pushed you to write this piece?
Actually, I've had ongoing conversations with guys. I've overheard conversations, and I came to the realization that men carry so much emotionally without saying a word. I don't know. I feel like I needed to be that voice of understanding, because as a woman, I have been in that place myself where I wasn't as understanding because of my own thing that was going on. You understand what I mean? And just by ongoing conversation, I realized that silence for men wasn't necessarily peace, it was their protection. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they live in a world that punishes them for expressing emotion or being human, you know? And as a result of those deep conversations, you realize that he isn't the only one that's hurting, but his family is hurting. You know, his job, it's affected. It's like a domino effect, pretty much. You know, relationships with wife, children, job, himself. You know, so I just wanted to be the voice that they choose not to express. To be that voice for them. Nobody gave me that authority, but I felt like I needed to, because there's so many other conversations going on about, and again, it's not a blame game. I just think I probably needed to bridge that gap then maybe of understanding.
So Barry, I want to ask you this question. When you think back to your boyhood, what were the messages you received about showing more emotion or asking for help?
Even though a young man growing up, you're expected to depict certain type of behaviors, but nobody teaches you. And then because of that, because you're not taught and it's life learned, and when you learn things on the fly like that, you tend to make mistakes. And then what happens when you make mistakes is that you are not necessarily beat down, but you're corrected in not know exactly the softest ways while you make these mistakes. And over time, what you end up happening is you end up building up almost a wall that makes you very hardened in how you feel in relation to making a mistake. And then that transcends into you from a child into being an adult, where you're almost so hard on yourself that you refuse to fail, and you take certain steps with such a hard-nosed, hard-line approach that you almost sometimes come across as arrogant. And the reason is really and truly because you never had any lessons, which lessons don't prevent failure, but they reduce it significantly. But when there's an absence of lessons, the likelihood of you making mistakes are more, and the way in which you're corrected in making those mistakes is not necessarily, as I said, in the most softest learning environment. So from a child, you find that men have developed a view that they don't feel like they can express themselves and unexpress themselves in a way that they are open to not knowing and open to making mistakes. And that, I think, transcends a lot of time into adulthood, and then creates a mental capacity that I think almost, I call it arrogant, but I don't know the right word, but a lot of men that they hear, they refer to, they say they're hard nosed, they don't listen. It's because the world in which we live in and the way in which a lot of us are grown is that we're not allowed to make mistakes from a tender age, and that transcends into adulthood.
Wow, you said so much right there. That could be a whole conversation. I was trying to unpack what you said just now, but I want Coach Gerald to chime in. Barry spoke about, a lot of things, like I said, the way you're corrected as a child, men don't feel that they can express themselves, He even spoke about the fact that some of the time it leads into them being looked at as arrogant, So I want, from your coaching experience, what are some of the earliest conditioning that begins, that teaches men emotional suppression?
Well, hi again, but first of all, I just want to say that, Barry did such a really, really good job with expressing all of that. And I really just want to piggyback my answer off of what he said. We're definitely conditioned as young men to learn how to thrive in silence, whether it be good or bad. Things that we've heard as young men, we've heard things such as, stop crying before I give you something to cry about. Or big boys don't cry. Or, any sort of semblance of showing any kind of emotion. It is being seen as a deficit towards our masculinity. And these are the social cues that we as young men, we learn and we carried all the way up into adulthood. And when we've carried all of these scripts in our mind, we form a paradigm that tells us that in order to get love and acceptance from our families or the ones who knows us or the ones who love us, in order to get love and acceptance from them, we have to stay silent. So we've learned to mask our pain with silence, and we learn how to acquiesce in order to get along with these social norms that men have to stay silent, even though they're in pain, even though they're hurting. And we do this to our deficit because we become emotionally bankrupt at a very young age, to where we don't know how to express ourselves. And all of that energy, it doesn't just disappear. It just gets transferred to somewhere else in our body. And it might come out as rage. It might come out as extreme sadness, so many different things. But these are the things that these are the ways in how we suppress our emotions, and it comes up in toxic ways. And that's why we have something called toxic masculinity. So this is all programming that we've had as children, and we've carried up to adulthood.
I want to ask Barry a question, but you just said something very interesting, or something that sent up like a little light bulb moment in my head. You said to get love and acceptance, we must stay silent, right? But I thought that this was something that was told to girls. How do you make the differentiation between that for boys and girls? How do you make that differentiation?
That's an excellent question. So the thing is that the world that we live in, society that we live in, unfortunately, in most instances, it doesn't foster expression, whether you're a man or you're a woman. So in the case of a man, what the world teaches us to do is teaches us to silence our emotions, our feeling nature. And of course, this is a result, one could argue it's a result of patriarchy. You can go that far back. But for men, it teaches us to silence or suppress our emotions. For women, they teach women to silence or mute their voices, don't speak. Women not to be seen and unheard. So there are it's the same issue, but just two ways of how that issue is expressed through gender. And that's issue of, one could say, of nurture, how men are nurtured. So for instance, even in different societies, for instance, I know for a fact in the Black community, one of the troubles that we have is that Black men they struggle to speak up about the pains that they're going through, versus perhaps in different culture, perhaps in I don't want to say white culture, but perhaps with our Caucasian brothers, they're more taught that emotional expression is okay. So when you look at these statistics, you can see almost there's a disparity between the two ethnic groups or ethnic backgrounds, and one has to wonder exactly how it is or why it is in our society as it pertains to different communities. Why is there a disparity in terms of how men are able to express themselves? But generally speaking, men are taught that you have to suppress the way how you feel in order to be rewarded. And when you are, and the reward we get is masculinity. It's seen as feminine to be expressive, or feminine to be emotional, or feminine to show love. So yeah. And versus with women, again, it's suppression, but in a different way. It's suppression with their voices. Don't speak. Your opinion is not to be heard. We want to see you, not hear you.
Yeah. That clarifies it for me. But Barry, what does being strong look like for you, and how has that definition changed over the years?
I want to first start by, picking up on something that Coach said. He spoke about what masculinity represents within the Black community. And this is something that I've actually done some reading on, and don't ask me to quote, but I can give a summary of what it is. And it comes back to what the Black community initially, 300 years ago, depicted as a strong man. A strong Black man was a big, strong, muscular individual who would fight off anything and everything that came his way. And that continued throughout the many, probably centuries, probably 200 years. And it is continuing now. And then what if you understand what a man holds true as strong, it is highly, in my opinion, dependent on what the females hold true as strong. And if you look back to what the black woman represents as a strong man, he may not be physically strong, but he's a leader in her mind. He's a provider. And I mean, the strong part then comes back to being a protector. You know, if you talk about the lesser persons that look at in a negative way, but them proud for say them man a bad man, and you know, from that perspective. And a lot of men try to hold on to that perspective almost to a fault, right? So they try to hold on to trying to be something strong, even when they're not physically strong. They try to depict that and then resort to other different type of things to you know, show them dominance of strength. So what society as we know it, and as you might know, I'm in Jamaica, so I can speak heavily about the Jamaican society. What the Jamaican society has was a man that has prowess and power, and that's what is displayed as strong. Now, it also transcends into the man being a provider. Now, in the real sense, and if as Coach referred, if you look at the other, you know, ethnicities and what strong is, those aren't many of the characteristics that they look at. So what you find is that you end up acting as being a strong individual, as being out of character. Because I might have some physical size, but let's assume I was 5'5", 110 pounds, and I was a small individual. But I still need to depict as if I'm 6 foot, 250 pounds, because that is what is expected of me, both by society, but largely led by what is expected from me by the females around me. Not blaming females, you know, because men have expectations as well. And we can talk about that for what a strong woman is, but I'm referencing what a female will expect of a male in terms of demonstrating strength. So I think it has started from many years ago, as I said, probably 200 years, of what a man supposed to be strong is. And I kind of mentioned earlier about you almost have to be arrogant with it, because you can't show weakness, because there's little to no weakness in the word strong. And because of that, it end up with the suppression of this part of strength that most people are supposed to have, which is the emotional part, because that's the part that you show the least. Yeah, how do you show you're emotionally strong? Yeah, how you do it? And if you look at it, it's actually counterproductive. How do you, if you lose somebody and you don't cry, they say you're emotionally strong. But if you cry, you're emotionally weak. So even those things are counterproductive in terms of what it is, a demonstration of what true strength is in society as we know it now. I think is almost misleading a lot of our men into being who they are. So it's not that they're trying to fight what they should be, you know. It's what they're caught in a conundrum of what society would say and give points for versus what I would call is healthy. And it is always easier to satisfy society more than it is to, because you end up being lonely, you know. And you look at you read the Bible, you talk about those stories. Any human being in the past who has chosen to do what they think is emotionally right have always been looked at in a negative way. And that continues now, right? So if you don't demonstrate strength in the way that you're supposed to, then you're considered weak, and that's nothing that any man wants to be. So as I said, if you lose a loved one and you stand up to one side and you're crying about it because it has emotionally hurt you, you're going to hear negative comments about you, when really and truly, if you study, that is actually the right thing to do, right? To release emotionally. But so strong in society now has shaped how a lot of men are. And once it comes down to a discussion about society, the discussion is never going to be easy. It's never going to be simple. It's going to be so encompassing of all different things that we'll be here talking for hours. But the strong in society, I think, as a man, is leading who a lot of men become. There are some of us who are still stepping outside of those boundaries and understanding that we're confident in who we are, and we know now what, especially if you're exposed as coach to other ethnicities, you realize that strong can be different from what we know it, but that is not happening to many.
Okay, so I'm hearing you, and it's true, you know, everything that you're saying. And one of the questions that came up, I wanted to ask Faith, you know, when you mentioned the whole matter of the say for argument's sake, someone passed, and you said that if you don't cry, you're emotionally strong, but if you cry, you're emotionally weak. Do you see it that way, Faith, as a woman, from a woman's perspective? Do you see it
Actually,
like
no.
that?
Actually, no. Strength is not the absence of emotion. And that's what most people fail to understand. Strength is actually mastering your emotion. And I'm not a psychologist. This is just, for me, this is my common sense and just how I have observed life. And I think for men, like for me, a strong man is one who is grounded enough to lead with love and cry without shame and love without ego, and still protect and nurture, because you can do all of that and still express yourself. Because, to even go back to suppressing whatever it is that they're suppressing, that emotion that they're suppressing, it's going to find a way to express itself. And that comes out in anger, self-sabotage, you name it. And half the time, on the outside, we're looking at it saying, oh my God, you call him all kinds of names because, he shouldn't react that way or whatever, but you don't know what he's carrying inside. And so when he's holding on to that pain, and all he wants is just a little bit of compassion, the same compassion that we ask for as women, or as, let's just go as basic as a human being, one human being to the other, the same compassion and understanding that we are looking for, we should be that for the other person.
So I'm coming back to okay, so go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. So I want to go back to Barry, and I'm coming to you, Coach Gerald, because you need to chime in on this. So Barry, I want to ask you, so Faith and I share the same opinion. You would be exposed to other women. Do you think that is it, even though society says to show pain is what did I say, emotional weakness? Generally speaking, when you're among your women friend, is that the sentiment? Is that the general sentiment, or is it more in line with?
Yes, it is. And if you look, and the beauty about social media now is that we have content in so many forms and podcasts such as these, and some are done in the fun formats and some are done, in a more structured way. And if you look at a lot of those, just use that as a base, right? If you look at a lot of those kind of interactions between men and women now, whenever a man decides to speak up about himself emotionally, the new word is that him sassy. So therefore, the society is telling men that they are not allowed to express how they feel. They're not allowed to express emotion. So you said something to me. I'll just give a quick example. You said to me, we're on a dating show and there are many of them out there. And I look at you and I said, why, I don't know. I don't necessarily like that she has her hair that long. And then the response is, oh, I don't like your shirt either. I say, well, that's fine. And then the woman can say, I don't like your shirt, I don't like your pants, I don't like this. But if a man, if you said yes, but it's not my preference for a woman with long hair, oh, you're sassy. So a man can't express generally in a simple way how he feels without being called sassy. A man is not expected to have a banter with a woman or another individual because you're called girly, because you want to express your views and state how you feel. It then, again, go back to strong versus weak. It projects that you are a weak individual, because as a man, you shouldn't say anything. A woman should be able to speak her mind, but if you answer, you're considered something else. So yes, that has been my experience, and that has been my experience with a lot of women, primarily not only Jamaican but Caribbean women, is that which I can refer as black, because that's my reference point, right? They have a perception that if you're a man and you talk too much, meaning you're expressive, you're too expressive, then you're considered weak because you're sassy or because you love cuss like gal, that's how they consider it. So I think that has caused a lot of men, because no man wants to be called that, right? That has caused them to go back to what I was saying earlier. They don't want to demonstrate this weakness, they want to demonstrate as being strong, and because of that, them just suppress as a response to that.
I'm asking you, based on all of that, is that how you operate, not still at this stage of the game, or
no? So
for you?
So without telling you too much, I have been there, right? I have embraced counseling for the past 10 years. And that has allowed me to become more expressive and be more confident in myself and be more available emotionally. But I was there, definitely was. It just because of education and preparation of oneself is why I was able to move past that. But I definitely was there. I was definitely one that thought that as a man, if you said more than 15 words, you start chat too much. You need to just stop and shut up because women are like people are like man with talkie. I used to be there. But as I said, because I have done counseling and professional counseling and developed myself individually, I am not there no more. But I can tell you, 90% of my friends are still there. And then I just want to kind of add that to it. What it leads to, because anything in life is a practice, right? What it leads to, because of this suppression of expressing how you feel, it leads to inability to communicate. Because it's like anything else, because you don't say how you feel and you don't say how you feel often enough. When you are to do it, it's a very uncomfortable space. And because of that, you try to do it and you just feel fool and you feel clumsy and you don't do a good job at it. And then you get what you hear. You're a man, you don't know how to talk about your feelings because no. After telling you to shut up about it 100 times, I've now decided that I want you to speak this one time and you must be able to do it. So it also leads back to men becoming poor communicators, is the point I'm making, because they're not used to talking about how they feel. When they try, they fumble it. And then they come across and they might say unpleasant things or things that are misleading, or they themselves get upset that they can't bring themselves across the way they want to. So as that's to answer your question, I was there, but I've done some work on myself and I've noted societal, flaws is what I'll call them. And I've decided to go against the status quo in that regard. And I think I'm a much better communicator now versus 10 years ago. I'm much better. I'm stronger now, but stronger in a different way than I was 10 years ago.
Wonderful. Well, at least that is some good news because I thought this whole thing was changing. And here's where I want you to chime in, Coach Gerald, because really, I thought that this perception of, how men express themselves was changing. But I see it probably happens when men go to counseling, as Barry spoke about, or, they get this enlightenment or they get more self-aware. So chime in right there. And also, Coach Gerald, I want you to speak to how, the unprocessed emotions, pain, whatever it is, manifests differently in men, and also how us as women can discern between quiet strength and quiet suffering. Know when our men are suffering, so that we can, act differently.
So I just want to chime in on a point that Barry mentioned. So earlier in the conversation, I would have spoken about how patriarchy has a lot to do with how this entire conversation occurs with the silent suffering with men. So as it pertains to patriarchy, one of the things with patriarchy back in the day, patriarchy was responsible for putting masculinity as the head honcho, the most important thing in society. It was a commodity. And back then, when women were, I guess, considered property, femininity was considered to be a weakness. And it's important for us now to recognize that when the social programming that we've had as children, as young men growing up, we were told that if you were to express yourself or to show emotions, it would be seen as being weak. Not just being weak, but you will be seen as a girl. So remember back in the playground, one of the worst insults that you could tell a young boy is you're a girl. You throw like a girl, you act like a girl. That was one of the worst insults you could have told a young boy. And the reason for that was because from a very young age, we've been socially programmed to believe that anything that was girly was bad, inferior, or wrong. And coupled into that was the displaying of emotion, so showing any sort of emotional awareness. So we carry that into our adult age, and we believe that men have to repress it And as a result of that repression, that emotional repression, we have men to be a lot more irritable. They lack control. They tend to withdraw a lot. You have men who do things like they overwork themselves, and the reason why they're overworking themselves is because they're trying to outrun the shame of the unprocessed pain that manifests in us. You also have numbness, and so you have all of these quiet pains that we go through as a result of the unprocessed quiet pains that we suffer. And I think the second part of the question you were asking was how we can discern
How
between
how can we discern between the quiet strength of men
quiet
and when
strength.
they're when they're in quiet suffering?
Yeah. So with men, quiet strength, it feels more anchored. It feels as if the man is in control of himself. There is a certain stability that is being felt there with a man when he exhibits quiet strength. And as Faith said earlier, there's a mastery of emotions. You're not easily swayed to and fro. You're able to have control. There's a saying that I think is he who controls his, or he who wins the battle in the mind wins the war. It's one of the principles of the art of war. It's a book by, I can't remember the name of the author. But basically, the concept of the premise is that if you're able to win the battle in your mind, you're able to win the war. If a man is able to win his emotional battle or control or win that emotional battle, he'll be able to have control and mastery over himself. And that's what quiet strength is versus quiet suffering, which is where a man would feel perhaps absent. You're looking at him, he's dazed. He doesn't know, he lacks any sort of purpose in his life. He's easily triggered. These are all aspects of how we could recognize between quiet suffering or quiet strength. And I always train people to look how to exhibit the strength. And if you focus on that, everything else that is not like it will just fade away. So instead of training people to look at, this is the negative to look out for. You don't want your frame of reference to be the negative. You want your frame of reference to be the strength. So you always want your frame of reference to be strength and not weakness. So I will always tell people, if you want to have, or if you want to work towards a goal of perhaps in this instance of quiet strength, look and have a frame of reference of strength. So all the qualities that I've mentioned before. So a woman, she could definitely feel energetically where a man is more geared towards, if it is quiet strength or quiet suffering. So I think that's one of the easier ways to begin to discern where a man is at.
You wanted to chime in, Barry?
Yeah, I wanted to add to a point that Coach had said that he spoke about masculinity. And it's funny that I was watching a Mel Robbins podcast the other day that spoke specifically about masculinity, right? And in summary, they were talking about the burden of masculinity and how the burden of masculinity has forced a lot of men to become who they really and truly don't want to be. The burden of masculinity where you have to demonstrate the things that we spoke about earlier. That is what is society depiction of strong. And a lot of those things include suppressing suffering, which he just spoke of, because you're working yourself into the ground, because you have to be a provider. You're there breaking your back to keep the yard because that's what the man's supposed to do. And those things, and you can't come out and say that, hey, this is a cry for help. And the conversation kind of spiraled into what is a cry for help. And people think cry for help sometimes only results in, when somebody's feeling depressed or having some emotional battles. But there are many other forms of cry for help that actually happen long before you get there. So the man is working 16 hours a day and feel like him life not going anywhere. That happens long before he gets depressed. And him saying, boy, I'm not managing. What do you mean? You're supposed to be a provider. So him work himself to the ground. So the masculinity and the pressures of masculinity, just to add to his point, is one of the prerequisites almost that lead to suffering in silence.
Wow, that's a powerful point. And my question is, what is the opposite though? what is the opposite of this burden of masculinity? What are your thoughts on that, Coach Gerald? How can men better manage this so-called burden?
Well, first and foremost, we have to understand that masculinity looks different to so many different people and so many different cultures. I can tell you of, growing up in the Caribbean, you have the idea of masculinity being, just as Barry expressed, you have to be 6'5". God forbid you're under 5'5". You have to look a certain way. You have to speak a certain way. You have to suppress your emotions. Don't cry. Be stoic. You have to, you're at the mercies and whims of whatever society determines what masculinity is at that particular day. Versus, when I traveled, I lived in London for a little bit, and you meet so many different people who are coming in, so many different cultures. And I remember seeing, a group of men, old men and maybe some middle age, and they look like they could have been Italian mobsters. And I was like, oh my God, and they all came like next to me. And I guess they were waiting on someone, and there are a group of other people who came to meet the guys who were signed up next to me. And I'm looking across, and they're all kissing each other's cheek and hugging each other. And I was like, wait, what's going on? And nothing funny was going on, but this is in their culture, how Italians show love and appreciation for another guy. And this is considered to be extremely masculine. And in the Caribbean, if that happens, you best be able to duck a glass bottle because someone might throw something at you. And it really reminded me as to the importance of how community could easily influence you for good or for bad. And that is the I don't want to say weakness, but that is one of the cons of being in a community. The price you pay for being in a community is inconvenience. And sometimes you have to recognize that what is being put on you and not is who you are. And that is what I feel for masculinity. You have to be able to determine what works for you. There are some people who, some things may not work for them. Like there are some men who they don't have a physical bone in their body to be going up, 4 o'clock in the evening to go cut grass. They just can't do it, but they could be leaders in a different way. And God forbid, I don't want people to believe that it has to look a particular way. It doesn't. And as society grows and as we begin to get more and more information, for instance, 10 years ago, this conversation about men, expressing emotions, it wouldn't have happened. But with knowledge and information, we become more and more aware. And this is why I wrote a paper of this of this topic in jurisprudence in law school. Feminism doesn't just help women, but it helps men as well. And how it helps men is because it tells women that you don't need to fit in a gender role given to you by society. And it's the same thing for men as well. There are different ways to express masculinity in a healthy way, in a way that's productive. And when we're able to break free from that box or that constrict of what it's supposed to look like, then we'll be able to make more healthier decisions and make decisions that are geared towards who we want to be in society.
Boy, I'm listening to the conversation and I just can't imagine that in this modern times that we're talking about this. And it seems as if there's little change, but I guess with more conversations like this, it will happen. And I remember this viral TikTok where, I think it was TikTok, but where the gentleman was calling his homeboy, in the night, going to bed.
Yeah,
And I don't know if you guys saw it. And he's calling his homeboy and he's just saying good night. And I'm like, the response of the men, what is it about our Caribbean space that has encouraged this kind of toxicity? But I mean, like I said, it's an ongoing conversation.
We've seen emotions.
Jackie, I want to point out something to you. I don't want to make it, I say this in a public space and I hope my parents don't feel upset at me, but when I was growing up, the person who was more hard on who I should be framed as to be a man was my mother. My father was the one I could talk to, who I could lean on when I felt weak. And he would have that conversation with me. And I have a son, as I said, my eldest son is 14. And I see a difference in him because I am allowing him to have conversations. He's still not as talkative as I want him to because he's still impacted by his school environment, which still is pushing that state that I grew up in, the state that we're trying to move away from some 30 years later. But his mom is also one that allows him to express himself and talk about his feelings. But as I said, the balance that we're struggling with is his state at home and his state at school. And, when he's interacting outside with his friends is still very different. And I bring that up to say, I don't think it's going to change. And I'm not trying to put a spoke in the wheel for probably 50 years because it requires so much. Yes, we're starting to move, but the societal changes are so much that is needed because of the different spaces. As I just spoke about my son's space at home, his space at school, and he has football that he goes to. And again, it's another, you have to be masculine because you have to can take tackle and you can't cry when you get kicked. So there are so many different spaces. And while from my personal perspective, we're trying to change his space at home, he still has these different spaces that he will then still be strongly impacted by. And because of that, I think it's going to take another few decades before we get to that place. And Coach talk about just experiencing other societies. And I've experienced other societies, and where they are 100 years ahead of us because the men are able to express themselves. There's no specific defined roles in a relationship. Two people come together. The man not to sweep the yard. There are stay-at-home dads in those societies. There are women who work and the father takes care of the other things in the house, him cooking, clean. There are some roles where the father, as I say, is not physically able to do plumbing and they fix this and fix that, which is the super dad role in the Caribbean. So you find that those societies are ahead of us. But also what gives me hope is because of the exposure of the boundaryless world that we have, people are seeing these things and knowing that they are happening elsewhere and they are working. And I think a lot of people are embracing it because when I go back to just watching the shows a lot of times and the women say these things and call the men sassy. What gives me hope is when you go in the comments, the amount of people are in the comments saying, why the man can't say what him say? Why is she allowed to express herself and he's not? So those things give me hope that we're heading in the right direction. But I say that to say, I still think we're decades away.
Well, I'm the girl who always look at the positive, and you're right. As I think about it, I'm saying that for real, it's going to take a lot for this change to occur, but we're having the conversations. I'm so happy that the world has become such a large global space and everybody have access to everybody. And there's just a lot of exchange of information that is going around. And so hopefully that will impact, hopefully that will impact because listening to this, no. Oh my goodness. This is like us here in the Caribbean. We need to step up our game. It's ridiculous. And it's holding us back, And I wanted to ask Coach Gerald, we really need to move on because we have a lot to cover. But I wanted to ask you, Coach Gerald, Barry spoke about the fact that he's doing his part, but because of the influence at school and the other spaces that his son will venture into, it becomes a little bit difficult. But I'm just curious, which space? I'm thinking that is from the home. Which space should influence the child more? Or am I looking at it from a surface level when I ask that question and it's way deeper?
Absolutely. I think the influence should definitely come from the home 100%. You have to remember that although the school is going to be an influence for the child, the child itself, the principles and the indoctrination, it starts at the home. So the lessons that you're going to give the child, the freedom or the expression, or the space actually to allow the child to express himself, that is going to transfer, even if towards, maybe the ages of, let me say 12 to 16, it might be a rough patch because that's when the child is about to find himself and he's playing with his identity.
Trust me, yes.
Yeah. So that's a period of self and exploration. So even though he might sway to and fro, you're going to give the child enough room or enough rope to go and venture and explore and figure himself out. But one thing I've understood, I've seen, and also understood from my own life and seen my brother's life, as long as that child has that foundation, he's not going to sway from it. He might slip, he might fall, but he's always going to return to that foundation because it's what he knows, is what he's comfortable doing. So I do believe if you want to have a great impact or to even change the world, you always start with an individual, because the world is made up of countries, and countries are made up of communities, and communities are made up of neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are made up of family, and family are made up of individuals. So you have to start with the individual if you really want to make an impact. And yeah, you're gonna see the child is gonna go through so many different voices and so many different influences, but you should always try to be that open space for that child to come and be free to express themselves. Even if you don't particularly like how it is, they might say it in the moment, still be that open channel for that. And I promise you that child is going to stick to what you've trained them to.
Thank you for that. Faith, in your feature, you highlighted that men are often expected to hold space for women's emotions, but not vice versa. How can we as women start to offer the same kind of grace?
First, we need to pay attention to the small gestures. We need to learn to be emotionally curious instead of judgmental. You know, when he gets silent or he seems a little grumpy, instead of feeling, why doesn't he love me, or why do I feel neglected, or whatever, ask yourself, okay, is he hurting? And what does love look like when you're hurting? And then even as he seems distant or silent, kind of just, again, pay attention to the little things. He might go on the road and you haven't heard from him, but when you do see him, he brings you your favorite snack, or you're stuck somewhere and he knows that you need to go to wherever, and he finds himself to pick you up, to take you about, despite all that he has going on. Just simple things like that. If we pay more attention to those things than literally just internalizing it and saying, oh, it's all about me. Also just think, okay, you know, again, if I am in this space and I'm feeling this way, how is he feeling? Do you understand what I mean? Like, I always try, like, for instance, I remember having like conversations with females before, and they would constantly complain about their person. And they would get upset with me because my question was always, okay, so he's responding this way, but what did you do? But I didn't do anything or whatever. And I said, yes, but were you listening? Were you listening to how he was expressing himself? And if he wasn't expressing himself, the silence is even louder. So there's so much that's being said without him saying anything. Are you observing enough to know what is happening? And half the time, that's not their concern. No, that I don't want to hear that. This is how. So you really just have to exercise that sense of curiosity. And then because all right, you're asking a man to be emotionally available, right? But in order for him to be emotionally available, you need to be that emotional safe space for him. And if you're not that, then what you're asking for, you're definitely not going to receive. And then we're constantly going to be, butting heads. We're constantly going to be at that place because he's not trying to understand me. I'm not trying to understand him. There has to be some common ground, right? When both parties understand that we're literally looking for the same thing, understanding, compassion, love, harmony. We just have different ways of asking for it. And then sometimes what we're asking for is actually showing up for us, but just not the way we are expecting it.
I love that.
So that's where I'm at with that.
So you're saying that women need to be a little bit more understanding, a little bit more compassionate, and don't expect that men are going to respond in a way. We have to pick up on the cues, in other words. And Barry, I wanted to chime in on that. Share your opinion on what Faith has just expressed, and really from the standpoint of, do you think that men can be more emotionally available, and would this help in how we communicate and interact with each other?
I kind of spoke about this a little bit earlier, right? When we spoke about what has been the experience of the man growing up, right? And I can almost bet that in his earlier years as a boy growing into a young man, his experience has been that whenever he tried to speak up for himself and talk about himself emotionally, he's always been shunned. He's been put down. He's been told to stop him nice or sit down. Nobody wants to hear that. So if you look at what his experience, his life experience, and his cognitive experience has been throughout all of that, is that he has not had positivity whenever he tried to speak up about how he feels. Then he comes into to manhood, and he's now experiencing a relationship with a female who has these preconceived notions herself of what a man should be. Now, she can have it two ways. She can be an excellent communicator and expect him to be at the same place as he expect him to be at that place. But he's not at that place because his experience in trying to express himself and communicate before now has been shunned. So he has limited to no experience, and therefore is unable to adequately express how he feels. And then you have the next individual who has tried to express how he feels, but that is determined to be weak. Because how can you be as a man be looking at me? How can I be as a man be looking at you as a woman that I'm supposed to be leading and saying what you said hurt me? Words can't hurt you. Right? How can that be? The two things just don't connect. So what happens is that you find that a man struggles a lot of time to find a way in which he can express how he feel. And even when the door is opened, and this is not a man thing now, this is a general human thing, that when the person opens the door to say, tell me how you feel, and you start tell them how they feel, them say, but you can't say that. You can't, like your feeling is not justified, which are coming from a man that was already in a negative place to encounter that. It does make the situation worse. So it has to be a very long journey for a lot of people in relationships, where both persons have to learn to respect individually the person's feelings and also work together to be able to communicate. But I can tell you, I have too many friends that they talk to me and then I talk to the spouse. Right? It's crazy. But they're not comfortable in saying, because they might say, I give you a very recent one. He's trying to express himself to his partner, and she said something, and said, listen, girl. And the conversation went south.
Of course.
Call her girl. We come from a Caribbean country where girl is a woman, and yet still it's offensive. Not only that, I know.
In that context.
Hold on. So, and I'm just telling you how I was trying to paint the picture of the whole conversation, right? So the essence of the conversation was my feeling. But now it changed from my feeling to me saying a one word that you don't like. And I mean, that's a communication skill, where they've moved away from the total message to the framing of the message as the importance. And the conversation went south. So again, I go back to, he probably said that because he lacks awareness in a situation like that. You're careful of the words, you think about your words, and it come back down to the ability to communicate. And I've had too many of my friends who come to me, tell me what they feel, and then I articulate it to the persons, because they, in their experience and them trying to do it, they can't. As I said, some I think is ability, some I think is just emotion and from the other person and them themselves. But I just feel that men don't feel comfortable, in summary, to say how they genuinely feel. To look at a woman and say, and this is my personal experience now, I've looked at a woman already and said to her, you hurt me.
Wow.
And she said, you can't say that. And she started to give you 100 reasons why me saying she hurt me is not valid. No, when you have an experience like that, if you're not strong within yourself as a man to say, okay, I'm still continuing on this journey, you're turned off. And a lot of people in those times, them just say, oh, it's okay, I won't say nothing else. And it brings me to a point I wanted to make earlier and in closing. It is said in society a lot of times that is when the woman stop talking that there is a big problem. And I'm here to tell you, when the man stop talking, it worse.
Yeah.
Because guess
I
what?
agree.
The woman speaks so often. The men have very few chances. It's like you have a certain amount of points to speak, and you try to use them very sparingly and effectively. When he stops talking, I'm telling you, it's over.
Yeah, it's
That has
done.
been, yes, I can agree 100% with that sentiment. And you talk about the bottom line is that we have to get to a place where we respect each other, where and Faith spoke about the understanding. When I think about the dynamics of a relationship, I don't know. I don't know if there'll ever be a perfect one, where it is free of conflict, and free and each person understand each other 100%. But because we're moving on and we're moving forward and we're going in a positive direction, Coach Jarrell, what are some of the tips that you can share to allow us to bridge the gap, bridge the divide?
100%. Tell the truth. Tell the truth, the unmitigated, ugly, nasty truth, and trust that the person is able to handle it. A lot of, yeah, that's the thing. That's the burden of it. Because I've discovered that a lot of women say they want the truth, but they can't handle it, or they don't know how to respond to it. And that is something I believe that I believe in people in general have to learn how to handle the truth. But because I'm speaking to women right now, women have to understand that the truth that they desire. The reason why men lie is because most of the time it's out of fear, the fear of the response that they're gonna get. Even if they embellish the truth a bit, it's still a lie. So men lie most of the times because they're afraid of the response that the woman is gonna give to them. So I believe that one of the best ways is that if the man is able to tell the truth, and if the truth is able to be received well, it doesn't mean ignorance of the consequences of whatever the truth may cause, but simply just being able to create a space where both parties are able to be truthful with one another. I think that's a huge way to restore, or to at least bring some sort of balance, emotional balance in the relationship. Because when a man represses his feelings, he doesn't stop feeling because he represses it. He still feels, he just doesn't show it. And what we want is to provide a space where the man feels comfortable to show his emotions. So the truth, being able to tell the truth, that's one thing. And always remember at the end of the day to that you guys are on the same team. I know sometimes when arguments happen, there's a belief in your mind that I have to win or I have to prove I'm right. And a lot of the times the woman she wants to be right because she wants to be heard. And we have to understand that because we're on the same team and because you guys want the same thing, just keeping that in your mind and understanding that it's not a competition to see who's right. I think that will help a lot of discussions go a little bit more fluid. I think those two things are just the most important thing. There are so many other things that could help, but they might be specific to the situation at hand. But I think if those two things are at the forefront, I believe that we would have a lot less conflict when it comes to emotional regulation with men and women in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Well,
I just wanted to add to what Coach was saying, right? So in one discussion, I would have heard another person speak about truth and the reason why people lie, right? And he built it down not solely to, but heavily to shame, right? Shame because you're shame of your actions, you're shame of your consequences, you're shame of everything. But one thing in particular, no, in truth, in relation to this discussion was when he mentioned that you're ashamed of the reaction of the individual. When you talk about your partner and your ability to express yourself to them, to say how you feel truly, back to our earlier discussion of what a man should be, you feel shame that you're displaying to them less than what a man should be. And because of that, you lie, you don't tell the truth. Not necessarily lie, but you may not honestly say genuinely how you feel. So in relation to the truth, just to add to Coach's point, the partner has to help the person to feel comfortable, to know that they won't be judged, because shame typically in this instance comes from judgment, right? Mm-hmm. And they won't be judged and they'll feel open enough to be able to have the discussion. The second thing is, we have to come to a realization in today's day and age that relationships need to be partnerships. And a lot of times when we look at relationships 100 years ago, the father did do all the work, the mom take care. There was very defined and specific roles. In the modern world we live now, that I don't think makes sense anymore and is not very realistic for the majority of people. We need to move to a stage of what, to your point as well, that we are on one team and it's a partnership. And some days, if you use a basketball analogy, and a fast break, you might have to play defense. You know, and it might going the opposite way, you might have to play offense. You have to move away from the place where we hold people so hard and fast to these specific defined roles that we don't feel like if the person don't do what they're supposed to do, what you're going to do, make the team lose. That cannot make any sense, right? So just to add to his point, I think we need to move from a relationship framework to a partnership framework where we're almost running this business together. And where one person falls, the other one pick up your strengths. And not only this thing where it is because it is your strength today, it will remain your strength because we're all growing and evolving, right? So that's those 2 points I wanted to say in support of what Coach Jarrell said.
Mm-hmm. Might I add something to that? Can I just to add to that what you were saying? Because on any given day, my 100% will look different on each day. And you know, if I can give 100 today or 80 today, it's okay for the other person to make it up with the 20. There's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But also I think what couples need to understand is that there is no person without baggage. Everybody has their own baggage, whether they've gone through therapy or not. At some point, something is going to trigger you at some point. And if you understand that, then you will know not to use the person's vulnerability as ammunition.
So I'm listening to everybody, and especially when Coach Jarrell spoke, and I'm figuring that some boundaries, expectations need to be established at the beginning in order for us to flow as we should, right? It's not a matter of we're going to jump in and nobody knows the expectation of the other person, because like Coach Jarrell said, at the end of the day, we're on the same team. So Barry, we're kind of trying to close now, and I wanted to ask you, what makes you feel seen and respected as a man? You.
Well, as I said, I'm going to give you the answer in two states, right? So I'm going to give you this answer of me 15 years ago, and I'm going to give you the answer of me now. In your past 40, a lot of things change, right? So, but for 15 years ago, what would make me feel seen was me demonstrating my masculinity, me proving that I can acquire, I can provide, I can be strong, I can fix anything in the house, and doing those things and the recognition from those things is definitely what would make me feel seen 15 years ago. What the big fall off was when you did it and you didn't get any and you didn't feel seen, which is another thing that a lot of men struggle with. You know, this thing where you search for recognition, you know, or you search for something that is going to make you feel a particular reward for the effort that you would have gained. And that was the cliff that a lot of men fall off. But for me now, what makes me feel seen is my ability to become a safe space to anybody around me. the ability for me to be able to can interact with people in a way in which they are able to express themselves to me and I am able to express myself to them. And I am able to contribute to them and their lives in many different ways. Not just the little box that we had before, but in so many different ways, and the ability to just allow them to grow and allow them to embrace my growth. That is what makes me see now. But as I said, I've taken a journey personally to kind of step outside of just what society says and being what I want to be because of, as Coach would have said, because we've gathered so much information over the years that we can't be the same person anymore. We've learned, we have grown, we have changed.
I love that. And I love your point about, you wanting to be that safe space. That is tremendous. That's wonderful. Coach Jarrell, I would love for you to share, say about 2 or 3 points on how men can begin to heal without feeling that they're losing their masculinity or losing control of who they are.
So I think it's important to recognize that whenever men feel as if they need to heal emotionally, they feel as if they're going to lose a part of their masculinity. So that's that's a misconception I want to clear up. But I want to give a few points on this. So number one, the biggest point I would think I would want to drive home: develop a strong spiritual practice. So whether it is you go to your church, your mosque, your temple, whatever it is, but you need to connect to a source or a being that's higher than you. Why? Because as a man, it develops a sense of humility, understanding, and knowing and recognizing that you can't do this thing called life by yourself. So connect to the God of your understanding. It doesn't have to be anything grand or big. Just, for instance, a practice I do every morning: good morning, Holy Spirit; good night, Holy Spirit. You pray. Do something that grounds you. So, and number 2, honor your feelings by being honest. A lot of times as we've grown up not being able to be honest about how we feel, but now as a grown man, you know better. So if you know better, do better. And you can start by honoring your feelings, however you feel. If you don't know how to articulate it to someone else, begin to articulate it to yourself. Begin to, and I know this might seem quote unquote feminine, but journal, write, be able to express in words. I feel like this. I feel like crap. It doesn't even have to, eventually start with a sentence. Today, how did I feel? I feel like this. Then the next day, kick it up to 2 sentences, then 3, then 4. And then all of a sudden, you'll be like, you ever saw like Moesha back in the day? She started the episode by writing in a journal. That might be you. Just begin to get comfortable journaling and writing, expressing how you feel. And eventually, that exercise that you've developed by yourself, you'll begin to practice it with other people. Hey, that really hurt my feelings. I don't feel comfortable with this. This is, how I feel about that. And you would feel the sense of security because you've practiced it so much with yourself. And number 3, I'll just add in a 3rd point: learn to ask for help. Life is not meant to be lived alone. If you need help, if you're drowning, reach out to someone.
Excellent points, I believe. You heard it from Coach himself: develop a strong spiritual connection, honor your feelings, and learn to ask for help. I think that's a big one, and that's going to be a big one for men going forward. In one sentence, just one sentence, I want all of you to describe what's the new definition of a strong man.
I think a strong man is one who has the courage and is choosing to feel and express with humility.
I would say, well, it's, I guess, a little tough to just do it in one sentence, but for me, I consider a strong man to be someone who is grounded and rooted in God. I think for me, the principles of who God is, who Christ is, I think that's a definition of what a man should be, who should lay down his life for his friends.
For me, and I'm going to base my sentence off just you know what you know about biology. So for me, a strong man is a man who seeks to be better than yesterday. And I use biology because we constantly lose muscle as we grow, but we have to work to put it back, which means from a man's perspective, you're going to be losing some of your traits, some of your what you thought were your strengths, but you're gaining some more as you go along. So if you challenge yourself every day to just be better than you were yesterday, I think you'll continue to grow to be a strong man. But you might be different, but you'll continue to be strong.
Excellent points, I believe. All excellent points. Faith, you are representing for the woman, right? And I'm saying, after hearing the discussion, what Barry had to say, what Coach Gerald had to say, what has shifted in your understanding of male pain and love?
At first, I can take personally, I used to take it as to see it as emotional absence. He's checked out, that type of thing. And after listening to them, I realized dude's just exhausted. He's overwhelmed. I'm not trying to make a joke out of it. I'm just saying, in any given moment, it could just be that they're overwhelmed in that moment, and what I intend to do as a result is to continue to create awareness through my music, my writing, however I can, through conversations, to just, create more conversations around this topic, because I realize that, again, we're still, as we've been saying, we're not quite there yet, and it just takes patience and the desire to grow and to learn and grow and evolve as beings as we should. So that's basically where I'm at. I'm going to just stay on this side of the fence and be that, not that you all can't fight for yourselves.
Champion for men.
But I want to fight along with you. So that's what shifted. I'm even more committed to doing that now.
I mean, that's excellent, because, we need so much more of this conversation to be out there, and, for men participating, so that we get a better understanding. And I think it all boils down to, just as Barry said, just having mutual respect, understanding that, I remember the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Understand that we're different, we're different. And if we need to pause, then let's pause and regroup, and allow the men to be themselves. So, Coach Gerald, Barry, it's your time to talk to the woman. Talk to us and tell us what we should do differently when you go quiet.
I think when men go quiet, it's just first of all, don't be alarmed. A lot of times, sometimes men are just trying to process how they feel because they don't have the experience in articulating how they feel. They don't have that muscle is not worked out as perhaps how a woman's muscle for articulating how she's feeling is. So sometimes men might need a pause, and sometimes it's very healthy, because when there are some men, when they don't know how to feel, they immediately switch to rage or anger as a response. So if a man is taking pause, it means that he's either unable to articulate how he feels in that very moment, or he's trying to understand how he feels, because sometimes so many different emotion comes up, and left might be right and right might be left and down might be up. So give him a break to pause and to put to words how he feels. Don't be alarmed, and be, that's as Faith rightfully said, be that safe space for him to openly feel what he's feeling, or say how he's feeling without judgment, because it's toxic to a man's soul when his partner, the person who he's supposed to be doing life with, isn't that space for him to fall, or isn't that place for him to be weak. And women need to understand that because in that moment he's weak, that doesn't mean he's bad or he's wrong or he's not good. or he's, a faulty man. No, he just needs your support. It's a partnership. It's a two-way street. So, grace needs to be exercised to a lot more grace. It needs to be exercised towards men who, are struggling in this area.
Wonderful. You want to chime in, Barry?
Again, I want to kind of continue on what Coach has been saying, but there are 2 points I want to make, right? And I kind of want to set the viewpoint of the point, which is the average person who becomes a CEO. You go through either some form of learning before you go to school, or somebody brought you into a business and showed you the ropes, and then you're able to lead. A majority of men don't have that luxury. You have to start leading, and we talk about a 14-year-old boy, we talk about a 15-year-old boy, and the expectations placed on him from that age to be this way. And then when he gets to his 20s or however old, and he's now leading his household, it's just have understanding that this person is trying to complete this task without any training. And because of that, he might get it wrong. So what I am saying to a woman who sees that a man is silent is give him compassion. Give him compassion to understand that within himself, he's fighting many battles because he's probably tried and failed at this thing many times. And he's within himself struggling. Now, you don't need to pile onto that. You don't need to add to it to make it any worse. You need to provide some level of grace, as Coach said, or compassion to this man to try to understand what he's going through and just work with him. Again, let's talk about partnership to make him better. There's no partnership that does well when one person is fighting against the other. It will not work. The business is going to crumble. And the relationship that existed that probably was a precursor to the business is also going to crumble. So what we're asking the ladies for whenever the man is silent to give him some compassion. The second point I want to make is you are not him. And this is a mistake I think a lot of people generally make. But I find that women do it a lot, where men make decisions much differently from women. There's been many studies that when a woman walks into a store, she needs to look at 500 outfits before she choose one. But as a man walk in and him see the first shirt, him like it, bite, and him leave. Now, what women don't understand is that the reverse happens a lot of times in the other decision spaces, where a man might sit and struggle with a decision the same way she can't choose what to wear. He can't make a decision in some spaces in the same way. But the difference is a lot of times the person on the other side is demanding a decision, and this person is struggling. And the man has some role to it in that scenario too, because he needs to open up about why I'm struggling with decision and all of that. But it comes back to what I was saying, that even when the man is silent, she wants him to talk. No, when his decision process might be very different, and he needs to make the decision within himself first and then communicate it. So it comes back to what I was saying. If the man is silent, give him compassion, understand him. Are you ready to talk? Is there something I can help you with the decision making? Is this something that you've faced already and you have struggled with? Those kind of empathetic statements is what will help. And I want to broaden the statements of what we've made today, because we talk about a lot about relationships, as in intimate relationships. But I'm telling you, the struggle spans much wider. Because I was reading something the other day, and it was saying, of the men who are depressed, some 70% are not in an intimate relationship, which means that a lot of the stress that they're facing is not from a partner that is a sexual, intimate partner, is from people who they are relating to on the outside world. So the points that we're making now is not necessarily specific only to somebody that is in a relationship. It's for your brother, it's for your uncle, it's for your friend, it's for your friend husband, it's for every other male that exists that you have to interact with. Just bear these things in mind. Because as a man, I've sat around my friends and had conversations, and we admit it, it's not easy to be a man. Women like to talk about, it's so easy. Yeah, it's easy to get ready as a man. That is where it stops. You get me? the woman process, like I said, is just variation. As a man, you get your throw on a shirt, a pants, you brush your hair. If you don't have much hair, all the better, you're gone. While a woman has to do much more. But the life of a man is very difficult. We think about a lot of things. We as men, and I think I speak for all men, take this role of leadership very, very, very seriously. And we're not talking about when a man think about leading, he don't think about him house only. He think about him community, how him display himself to him family, to him friends, to him co-workers. And it's a heavy burden to carry. And that is why a lot of men don't do well in carrying it. So in just understanding when men are silent, understand that it's not just your man that is silent, but all men. And I'm begging for compassion for them.
Excellent way to close out this conversation. And thank you so much for reiterating the expanse of what we're doing here today. It's not just limited to man and woman and children. And, it really is very expansive. And that is why the conversation needs to continue. More conversations need to be had. And I'm very happy that I remember when I started the Beyond Woman and I did the first magazine, and somebody, a male, said to me, "What about the men? What about the men?" This is 7 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. A lot of eyes have been turned to the man and the struggles that he's going through. And I'm very, very happy that we got an opportunity to talk about this. Usually this platform is really woman-centered, but I'm happy that Faith wrote the article and it inspired this conversation. And like I said, the conversation has to go on. It has to continue. And just to reiterate this last point, about what men, the expectations that men have of women. And Coach Gerald talked about the fact that not to be alarmed when the men go silent. We must allow them to be quiet, allow them to pause, be the safe space. Stop being judgmental. Give the man grace. And Barry, spoke about the fact that there's no training ground for them. There's really no training ground for them. So they might get it wrong. And we have to be understanding of that. And we have to give them the compassion, passion too, it helps. But you have to be compassionate towards them, give them grace. It's true, you rub the top of his head and it calms him, it soothes him, rub his back, and other things, but a wonderful conversation. I'm happy that we had it, like I said. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on and sharing this space with us today and sharing your insights towards this conversation. And I really hope that it will be impactful to our audience, our community of women, right? And I want to close out by saying that, so maybe the silence isn't the absence of emotion, really. Maybe it's just a language we have forgotten how to hear as women. And today, be reminded that the man's strength doesn't always roar. Right, Barry? Right, Coach? It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits quietly and it's waiting for an understanding, something that we've spoken about, the compassion, the empathy, the grace, And so if this conversation moved you, please share it, talk about it, ask the men, most importantly, ask the men in your life, how are they really doing? Like, not just in passing, like, really sit them down and ask them, how are you doing? And then stay long enough to listen to what their response is. So this has been the Beyond Woman Conversation, where we create space for healing, faith, and power. And I'm Jacqueline Johnson. Until next time, remember, love is not just about what we give, it's how we choose to see each other. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Beyond Woman podcast. I hope you're leaving feeling inspired and ready to take action. Remember, you are capable of so much more than you think. Keep pushing those boundaries, keep learning, and keep believing in your limitless potential. We want to stay connected with you, so be sure to follow us on social media at The Beyond Woman Magazine for daily inspiration and behind-the-scenes content, and to join our growing community of empowered women. Visit us at www.TheBeyondWomanMag.com and www.TheBeyondWoman.com, where you will find more resources and articles to support you in your journey. Sign up for our newsletters and be the first to know about our exclusive events and for more opportunities to connect. To all my Caribbean sisters, let's lift each other up. Share this episode with the women in your life who need to hear this message, and let's continue to build this powerful network together. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on this app. Your support helps us to reach more women. Thank you for being part of the Beyond Woman movement. Keep shining, keep growing, and keep living your extraordinary life.